good morning, or good evening over in California and definitely on the East Coast. Welcome to day one of the 5 day challenge. So, first of all, sorry, I am a few minutes late. I couldn't find my glasses this morning. It's 4 or 5:30 a.m. in Central European time. So, here we are. So, day one today is about getting real about how you feel, practicing honesty. So, for me, it took a while to really realize what I was doing. For example, when you're sending a text to your husband, I would be telling myself, I'm just telling him that the packed lunch is missing. Where's the lunch box that I gave you for the kids? And then I realized, okay, actually, I was blaming here. That was really my intention deep down. That was what I was doing. So it takes a while. The first time, so we have someone on here. If you have any questions, just pop them in here and I'll answer them. And I'm live on my computer. I'm usually on my phone, so let me see how I can see who's on. All right. Anyways, so I remember the first time I had a huge aha about getting real. So I don't know if you have this, but I would really have a big urge to be understood. So many times I found myself writing long text messages to my husband, explaining why I reacted a certain way. And it really meant a lot for me to be understood. And then one day, I'll never forget, I realized what I was doing. I was making excuses for my behavior. Like the more I needed to excuse it and explain it, and the bigger my need to be understood was, the bigger the quote unquote lie I was really covering up, which was, for example, that I acted out of jealousy. So I went really ballistic one night when he came home with the kids on a school night, I think 9:30 in the evening, maybe it was later. So I had a good logical reason to lose it or get angry. And he was there with his oldest son too. But if I was to get really real about how I felt, jealousy also played in because I always had some jealousy around his oldest son. Not jealousy in the normal term sense of the word, but it just stirred up a lot of feelings and there was a lot of things there. So on the surface, I was just really mad that he got home with late with the schools with the kids on a school night. And on the other hand, he was having fun. They were playing in the snow. They were having a great time. So it wasn't really jealousy. What it was that I felt excluded. I wasn't in the party. I wasn't with them. And it was really at the depth of me. So it's not something in my mind, but if I was really to look inward and get real about how I felt and why I was acting out of some kind of jealousy or insecurity, which basically it always is some of those emotions deep down. But I just remember writing those long explanation texts about why, justifying why I had the right to get mad at them, and pointing up all the reasons and all the excuses. But deep down, I knew that I had acted out of jealousy or insecurity, what I call bad behavior. Anything that stands in the way of connection is bad behavior. So blaming is bad behavior just because it stands in the way of creating a connection. And you always want to be in connection, whether it's connection with yourself and your own peace and your own source of love, or whether it's connection with your partner or your kids. And the opposite of that is our addiction or our habits to anger, to blame, and to complain. So from that day on, I knew that whenever I wrote long text messages, and I don't do that anymore, whenever I wrote long text messages and really had the need to explain myself and be understood, that's when I was making excuses. That was a magic moment. And for the longest time, when I look back, I always felt like what a woman really wants is to be understood. I don't really have that same need for him to understand me because what it came from was a misjudgment I felt. That's why I wanted to be understood, was because I felt misjudged. Because end of the day, maybe I didn't really trust myself and how I acted. When you know that you're acting from a good place and not a bad place, quote unquote bad, well, you know that you're acting from that place, when you're leading from love, you don't have the same need to be understood. You don't feel misunderstood. Feeling misunderstood is, when you really peel it down, feeling misunderstood is probably more about you being, disappointed in yourself for acting a certain way. Or feeling misunderstood is not a great feeling. I can still feel misunderstood today while acting from a very good place, but it is an indicator that if I feel misunderstood, I'm probably not acting exactly the way that I should. And it's only the way that I should in regards to, an inner compass of staying true to connection and to love and to acting out, not out of ego. So when I first had children and they were growing up a little bit, when they were younger, not infants, obviously, but I would get triggered if they didn't do what I told them to. Also, my husband and his son, if they didn't do what I said, I'd get triggered. Like, what was that about? It's not that it's for their own good, right? It's more about my ego and getting hurt that people don't do what I tell them. So, what is that all about? I don't get triggered anymore. I know that kids don't do what you tell them. But thinking about, what is that really about? Why do I get triggered? And on the top of our mind, we have this argument, it's because it's good for them to be in bed in a certain time. But is it really due to the kids' well-being, or is it my ego of resentment of not being listened to? And why am I getting triggered just because someone doesn't do what I tell them to? Why should I tell somebody to do something? Hey, Jan, thank you so much. Yes, this will be in the Facebook group, so you can just pop in and bring any questions that you have. I'll also answer them later on. Thanks for joining. It's really early, so I was happy you were on. Okay, just catch the replay in the group. And thanks for the feedback. I love that feedback. Yeah, have a great day or great evening if you're in California. So most of the people that listen to this are in California, and I am in Central European time. So we're trying to figure out a way to get as most people as possible on. So anyway, that's day one, is getting real about how you feel. It's honesty, like real honesty with yourself. You don't have to be honest with your partner, because honestly, my partner doesn't really want or need to know everything that I feel and think about. So I have this instinct to share everything, because to me that is love. That's what I tell myself anyway. I just need to share, not just sharing the excuses or the explanations or getting him to understand me and being desperate about that, but also just share what's going on. And my husband is not like that. He doesn't need to know all of that for us to be close. It can actually create a barrier if I overshare, because he doesn't really get it. And he gets nervous, I think, when I try to explain things, because usually it'd be followed by resentment and anger or hurt for me, because I get hurt that he doesn't understand me. So I've given up on oversharing and I used to be so caught up in him understanding me, and that's what happens. Both parties, and we literally did this sitting in a boat, but it's a good picture, right? So imagine a couple sitting in a boat, and something happens, and both parties try so eagerly to be understood at the same time, right? That can never ever happen. First, you have to make him feel understood. So try to understand first. Always try to understand first. Then you have a chance at being understood afterwards. So when both parties try to be understood at the same time, that's when miscommunication happens, right? That just, it cannot be. So always try to understand first. And I get that you really need to feel a need to be understood, but also know that that comes from insecurity of feeling misunderstood, comes from insecurity and a need to justify and explain some behavior. So rather look for the knowledge in whatever he's blaming you for. That's what you don't like. That's why you want to be understood. And it might not even be him blaming you. You just want to be understood, because in some sense, there's some kind of blame or accusation that you feel that you need to justify, and just trust and know that he knows and that you know that you have good intentions, right? That's what it's all about. even no matter how you show up, you have good intentions. And just stay. Hey, PJ, pop in here with any questions that you might have. So we're talking about getting real about how you feel and why we sometimes have a need to be understood, a very desperate need to. And when two couples try to be understood at the same time, that's when miscommunication happens. So always try to understand first, then you have a fighting chance of being understood. And also know, I had a big aha moment about writing long text messages and explaining my behavior, that why I would get mad, that it was okay to get mad because the kids needed to be in bed on time, or whatever practical reasons I had for actually doing what I call bad behavior, which is anything that stands in the way of connection. And then I knew that whenever I had that need to be understood and was writing long text messages, I was actually justifying some quote unquote bad behavior, right? So when both parties want to be understood, try desperately to be understood at the same time, you get nowhere. So always try to understand. And even though it feels uncomfortable because he's accusing you of something and you want to defend yourself, because deep down you have great intention and a big loving heart. There's just layers of actions on top of it that come from insecurity that end up standing in the way, that more or less always have to do with some kind of blaming or complaining or pointing fingers away from yourself. And when you put those layers on top of your very good loving heart and your good intentions, it creates a disconnect. And then what happens is you wind up wanting to defend and justify why it was okay for you to blame, or okay for you to do bad behavior or show up in a way that is not serving you, that gets you further from connection. So you end up trying to justify that with explanations, or you have a desperate need for him to just understand something. Like I was talking about when I was sitting in a boat with him and we both wanted to be understood at the same time. But I was actually very desperate about explaining, and why I couldn't give up my need to be understood first was that I wanted to explain to him that exactly what we were doing, because I just interviewed someone about this. Kim van der Berg actually was the one who told me this thing about when two people try to be understood at the same time, you can't communicate. One has to try to understand first, right? So that's what I really wanted to talk to him about, or explain, or I thought it was funny we were doing it. So that I was so desperate to understand that I didn't create the space to understand what he was saying. I didn't create the space for him to feel understood. So in leadership, if you want something, give it. If you want the feeling of being understood and heard, give that. Always give what you want, but give it in a way that is, for example, love to him or feeling understood to him. Like do it on his terms or her terms, right? So if you want love, give love, but give what's love to your partner, not what's love to you. Because if I was to give what I felt like is love, I would talk for hours about how I feel and how I think and my every thought. And my husband, if I give that to him, he gets scared because that's not what he wants. So sometimes I say for fun, but also in reality, that what's love to my husband, and it may sound a little crude, is silence and blowjobs, for example. So if you're really pragmatic, just give your partner what they think is love, what they feel is love, whatever creates love to them, and then you will receive it back, for sure. All right. Hey, Sangeeta, good to see you on here. I'm so happy Sangeeta's on. Good to see you, dear. I'm so happy you're connecting. And write any questions that you have. I'm happy to answer them. It's 5 a.m., or it was when we started here in Denmark. And I'm super happy to be on here to just service you and help you. And I want to do it the best that I can. And sometimes I do have a tendency not to just go on and on and on and not really listen. And I want to connect with you guys. So please write in the comment section whatever questions or areas or topics within this day number 1 challenge, within this challenge, or anything in general that you want me to cover. So I'd love to stay connected with you and know that I'm going in the right direction, serving you. So feel free to write anything that you want me to talk about. Or just share something, like something that you felt. Does it make any sense to you guys Do you have that same need to be understood? Do you find yourself writing long text messages explaining yourself or really feeling a need to be understood? Let me know if you've ever felt that way. All right. So that's what I felt anyway. That was a big aha moment for me. And another big point, turning point in my Lead with Love journey was when I didn't feel revenge. So I used to really feel revengeful. Like I would really, I was like, you hurt me. I hate you. Like I really wanted to physically, I imagined physically hurting him. That's how much I felt revenge. Okay, you feel that too? Great. So notice Sangeeta just said, yes, when you have a need to explain yourself and be understood, and that's very important to you, just notice when that's coming up and be open to the idea that that actually stems from some kind of bad behavior. And it's not like you naughty girl or you naughty boy. It's just behavior that's not creating a connection. When you have a need to be understood, look at what's really going on. Just notice when it comes up and be open to the idea that that might be an indication that you're going off the rail, you're going down the war path, or you're trying to defend something that's not worth defending. Like what's underneath what you're trying to explain and justify is some kind of behavior that's not creating connection. It's standing in the way of connection. And when you try to justify that with all these practicalities, like, I don't like beer bowls. Okay, I don't want to wake up to that. I don't want to wake up to the mess. I don't want to I want the kids to go to bed. Of course you do, and they should, but that's not the real issue here. The real issue is that you're trying to justify why you blamed, shouted, or showed up, or was passive aggressive, showed up in a way that was not your best leadership, right? You showed up in a way that's not serving you, that is not creating connection. And when you justify that, you just stay down the word path. So ask yourself, what's more important? Do I want to be right, or do I want to create a connection? Do I want to, it can also just be with yourself. If you're too busy to sit down and breathe, meditate, or whatever practices you do to tap into your inner source of love, and you're justifying it with saying, I'm too busy, and then you have this long list of reasons why you can't do something that deep down you know you need to do, whatever it is, to be in connection with your source and yourself. That's also excuses for bad behavior. Bad behavior is all the things that do not put you down the love path, but put you on the war path away from connection. Now, I forgot where I was on my second point. All right, so that's, notice when you have this need to explain yourself, what I call excuses and justifications, because at the end of the day, they're usually always about you trying to defend a stand that is really not serving you. Just be honest and get real. Just be honest. Okay, and this is what I say literally to my kids. Okay, mommy was blaming. That was wrong. And they also catch me and say, they really do, because I'm really open and honest. So I make tons of mistakes. But the good thing is that they're so vivid that I can't really pretend that they're not there, right? That's what I usually say anyway. So mommy makes so many huge mistakes that I have to acknowledge them, right? So I blame my kids, and then I blame them afterwards, like saying, but mommy's so tired. I'm like, wait a minute, sorry. No matter what state I'm in, I shouldn't raise my voice. It's not serving me at all. Or I shouldn't say words that make them feel that it's their fault. And I do sometimes literally phrase it like that. And what I do is I just get honest and I stop myself verbally. Okay, mommy was blaming. It was my fault. That was stupid. Sorry. And just say it out loud, and I change directions. You don't, it's like you go down the rabbit hole and you just, you go deeper and deeper. You don't have to. At any point in time, you can just be honest and say, shit, I didn't mean to. I didn't mean to complain or blame. Sorry, I don't know why I did that. So I have done that with my husband when I would still do it. I would have all this loving intention. And I miss him, I love him. I open the door, bam, I see something that hits my insecurity. It could be mess. That's just a simple, right? But it feels very, very real. And it can be a real reason why it's physically impossible to live together. But that's not the issue. So be aware, don't go down that war path. Just I opened the door, I'd see something, it hit my insecurity of can we really live together? Whatever reason, it just hit an insecurity and I start blaming. But then I course correct myself. I go over, I look at him, sorry, I don't know why I did that. I didn't mean to blame, and I'd kiss him just to stop talking, right? So you can always be honest. That's the power of honesty. So don't, just because you make one bad behavior, don't put another bad on top of it by justifying it. Just be truthful and honest about the fact that you were just blaming, and blaming does not get you to connection. It just stands in the way, and it's just a habit. So use honesty as a habit. Just bust yourself. Be super vulnerable and honest. It's very powerful. Okay. So let me know how this resonates with you. I really want to serve you and help you and support you. And I'm truly, truly honored that all the words that I'm saying actually help people. And I just want to say that it's all about practice. Honesty is about practice. Getting real is about practice, because we're so used to defending our stance and defending why I would be mad about beer bottles on the table. But it's all about, do you want to be right or do you want to be in connection? I could argue all day long for all these things, and it's not that they're not truthful. I still hate beer bottles on the table, but the reason I hated them with my husband when living with him is that it just stirred up insecurity. Those same beer bottles didn't matter if we had a great party or we had great sex, a great connection, and I woke up and I saw them. They don't always have to hit my insecurity. So there's a reason for them to be symbolic of something. Shouting to me, we cannot live together, it's never going to happen. That's my insecurity. I get to own that. So whatever outside factors play in, when you really lead with love and you're really in your greatest, and you can, everybody can, nothing from the outside world can really affect you. But if they do, it's great too. You just practice. You fail and recommit. So there is no right or wrong as such. It's just practice, right? But just be open to the fact that those things that trigger anger, trigger blame, trigger some kind of feeling that you want to push away, trigger something, insecurity in you, that's something in you that's getting triggered. That's what the word means. It triggers up a feeling, right? But that same thing that can trigger it doesn't have to. To always think about this: after great sex, does the mess really matter? No. And why is that? Because you've got love. So also be honest and get real about all that we want as human beings is to feel that connection and love, either within ourselves, when we're very peaceful, we're meditating, we tap into it, or with a partner. Once we get that, nothing else matters. The beer bottles, the mess, whatever it is that triggers you. So share in the comments here. I'd love to know what kind of things trigger your insecurities. What makes you really mad? What do you fight about? Is it money? Is it mess? Is it the children? Is it bedtime? Bedtimes is something for me that's really important. And I have to own the fact that it's not always about the children. I tell myself it's about the best for them, but it's really about the best for me because I have so much mommy guilt. I just want to do it right. My husband doesn't have that. He can put them to bed later, but I really literally start to flinch when I don't have those bedtimes. And when they're not, if it's 7 o'clock and I'm starting to get them ready, and I have tons of logical reasons, like I start work at 8 p.m., they need to sleep, it's good for them to sleep. So there are so many reasons, but end of the day, I have to own the fact that most of what I do and feel with my children is out of mommy guilt. It's to relieve the guilt that I really do feel. And I have to know that it's not just about value, about what they eat and everything. Most of the time, it's really not about what's best for them because we really don't know, right? So my husband is a complete opposite from me when it comes to bringing up children, but he does an amazing job, but he does it so different. But it's just the complete opposite, right? But it works. And sometimes when he comes with them, because we're living in separate apartments now, sometimes when he comes with them in the morning, they're really fresh, even though I know he put them to bed way later than me, at least 1 hour later. When I put them to bed an hour later, if I'm like viewing it or evaluating, or if I know it, then I make up a story that they're tired and then they become tired. But I remember one time he delivered them like 6 o'clock or 5 o'clock. they were totally fresh and ready. So he can do that. His way works for him. And it really does. So I know, because it works for him to do it that way, I know that it's more about me than it is about them. Honestly, that's why I get triggered most of the time. And you could say it's because it's against my values and what's good, and you're doing something against yourself. True, but it's about me, really, more than it is about the kids' bedtime. And bedtime is something like you'd say it's for the children's sake, right? It's not that I want them to sleep so I can have alone time. It's really because I feel that's what's best for them. But I believe also that's due to my mommy guilt and such a big need for me to do it right. And that's why I get so disappointed and so sad and would start blaming if I don't do it right, if I don't create that thing that I'm really, really desperate. It's kind of like when you have great expectations and you go into a pity party when your husband comes a little later or an hour later or whatever, because you look so much forward to seeing him. When you have great expectations, that's when a pity party starts to roll up. So notice when you're acting out of desperation for something. And that's what I honestly find. I'm really desperate or anxious to get them their bedtime in and get that in, because I feel so good when it succeeds. I'm really desperate to get them in time, in school on time, right? But that's mommy guilt. But also because it feels great afterwards. Does it feel great afterwards? Yeah, because they have a great day. So it is for them, but it's also because as a mom, you just want to succeed. And I felt so much that when I finally see them have a great day, and for me, in my mind, that follows them being on time. And it's quite early. It's actually 7:30. That's on time for them here in Denmark. They're allowed to come 5 to 8. But anyways, it feels great. And I don't want to let go of that great feeling, but it is still, end of the day, probably more about me than them. So mess triggers me. Great, Sangeeta. That's why we connected. So mess is my thing too. So for me, getting real about mess, I used to be very depressed, or used to, I don't know, clinically, I was probably in my 20s and clinically depressed for a few years, but also had those moods, right? So for me, mess, it represents depression. For me, when my husband is messy, it represents the fact that he doesn't love himself. So it triggers all my insecurities just as much for me as it does my insecurity. Like, why don't you love yourself? Why do you want, what? To me, mess stands in the way of our love. It has, and it always will, because it represents him not loving himself, him not living out his full potential, all of that. And then it's all about me at the same time, right? So Sangeeta, why do you think mess triggers you? If you're to be honest, what is that really about? For me, it's because I go back, I think back to when I was in a deep depression and I was stuck. So mess for me represents being stuck. And when I did Feng Shui, first started practicing Feng Shui, is when I turned my life around. So I did a number of things, but mess and Feng Shui was a big thing in turning my life around from depression and being self-destructive to building myself up. So it was my first transformation, happened along with Feng Shui and moving things around. Now I've gone a little back. I can have mess around. It's not, you can see it here. Like, I can live with this. It doesn't have to be all, which is good too. Key lesson is identifying your triggers. Yes, a respectful partner will respect and avoid your triggers. Yeah, PJ, I get your point, but you're still making it more about your partner than yourself. So the way I would look at what you're saying, and sorry to be so blunt, I really see what you mean, and I don't mean to just dismantle it. It's just, I want to serve you guys. And as a coach, it's not always my job to tell you what you want to hear, but to shift your mind. So it's not that I'm right and you're wrong, by no means, but how I would phrase that and look at that, practicing what I've learned to work the best, and just be pragmatic, is I would probably, if you say key lesson is identifying a respectful partner will respect and avoid your triggers. Here's how I invite you to look at it to create more connection. It's always about just getting to the connection point. Is you own your own triggers more than saying a respectful partner will respect and avoid your triggers, then you're putting it onto them, right? So think of you as the leader and the respectful partner, and just own your triggers. Identify your triggers. Know that, okay, I'm getting triggered. Something has come up for me. There's wisdom in it. Think about why you're getting triggered. And you might get triggered because you triggered something in your partner and she goes, oh, wow, on you, or he. But there's always a reason that they go, on you. Something triggered in them as well, right? So it could be you just saying something and that triggers them, and then you get that gut feeling in your own stomach. But there's always wisdom in the triggers. So I would look more and say a respectful partner owns their own triggers. A respectful partner knows they're getting triggered. A respectful partner can withstand your partner's triggers. I would look at it a way, just trust that your partner loves you, even though your partner cannot handle your triggers, or your partner cannot read your mind. So like my husband never ever has an intention to hurt me. And I at some point actually wanted revenge. That luckily changed, that I remember when. But when I wanted revenge, I did have an intention to hurt him for a few minutes, right? That was like really, but my husband has never ever had the intention to hurt me. So by saying a story that he should avoid my triggers, I'm then blaming him and I'm showing up as a leader because I'm not trusting him. I'd rather turn it around and say, you, PJ, trust that your partner never ever wants to hurt you. So even though it seems like she or he is not avoiding your triggers, turn that story around to tell yourself the fact that he or she will never ever intentionally hurt you. So they might not be respectful of your triggers in the way that they're showing up. But if you tell yourself that story, you're going to end up blaming them or feeling resentful. You're going to look at it from what they did or didn't do or should or shouldn't do. When you look at it from that view of what your partner did or didn't do or should or shouldn't do, that's standing in the way of connection. So my golden rule is stay on your own turf. Always look at what you can do, or what you should or shouldn't do, or could or couldn't do. That sounds weird. Just look at what's in your realm of control and power and what you can do. And then the feedback, what you see is what you get. So if you're focused on your partner should respect your triggers, I get that completely. And they should, but that's for them to focus on, right? So whenever you look at what your partner should or shouldn't do, they're not looking at it. So just look at what you can do. That gives the best chances for them to actually act more respectful of your triggers. But if you're focusing on it, that's not where you're going to get. You really, truly, what you see is what you get. And if you're looking at it like they're not respectful of your triggers, they should respect and avoid your triggers. You don't know what's going on in their brain. For them, it's not like they're not respecting or trying to avoid your triggers. That's never ever what's happening in their reality. But that's how you're going to perceive it. You're going to say, why don't you just clear the table? I get that conversation. I've asked it many times. Why doesn't he just clear the table? He knows I really, really want to. Like he did it once in like 10 years. He cleared the table, right? So I get you. But if you focus on it, that's just going to grow and grow and grow. And that's what you're going to see. And that's what he or she's going to do. The only way to get what you want is just focus on what you can do and stop focusing on what they should or shouldn't do. And just trust them. So always bring it back to you. And it may seem crazy and it may seem illogical. Just take 100% responsibility. Pretend that you're a great leader. Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton, whoever you look up to as a great leader, Dalai Lama, pretend that you're that leader. That really helps. PJ, let me know if that makes sense. So I agree. Key lesson is identifying your triggers. But if you look at it from a way that a respectful partner should or shouldn't do something, most times you're going to get disappointed and it's going to take you down the warpath, in my experience. And I have tons of experience in blaming. We used to make fun of how much I blamed my husband. Like, we made fun of it because it was so, blaming him for things. Oftentimes I moved them like always something I did myself. And that's how I figured out, end of the day, I was actually blaming myself. And that was because I had ambition and I wanted to do so much better than I was actually doing. So ambition is a key point in why it's like I have so much ambition that I was so disappointed in not doing a right job as a loving wife that I had to share the blame, build over, kind of blame spillover. Okay. So PJ, I'd love to know if it makes any sense, and also Sangeeta. So what triggers you? All right. So just to recap, day one is about getting real about how you notice when you're writing long text messages and have a need to be understood. It's most often time excuses and justifications for quote unquote bad behavior. And I got to get ready for getting the kids to school so that I alleviate some of all the mommy guilt, and or just looking at it on the bright side. I feel great in the morning when I put the kids to school and we have fun and no shouting and no blaming. I used to be a real idiot trying to get them to school, really mad because they didn't want to go on time and all of that. So when that, that's number one in my life. When that's fulfilled and that's good, that's just like starting your day with exercise, just starting it in the right order of things. And that's what I'm here for in this world, is to give them a good start in life. Thanks, Sangeeta. So thank you so much for being on. That means a lot to me, because it's way better to have people on and be connected with people than just sitting, talking, and not knowing what direction and have no audience on. So PJ and Sangeeta, thank you so much for being on live, and reach out anytime. And you guys as watching the replay, good job. Day one, get a feel about how you feel. And if you're still unclear about what that really means, which I certainly understand, just write me and let me know. All right, you guys, thanks for being on. Bye-bye. Have a wonderful rest of your evening. And it's Tuesday in Denmark. And I will see you at the same time tomorrow evening. Bye-bye, you guys.